بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونستعينه ونؤمن به ونستجيره ونستهديه ونستشيره ونستشهد به، فإنه حقا من هدى الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. ونقول: نسألك يا رب أن تقسم لنا من خشيتك ما يحول بيننا وبين معاصيك، ومن رحمتك ما يقربنا من طاعتك، وأن ترزقنا اليقين، وأن ترزقنا من اليقين ما يهون علينا مصائب الدنيا وأحداثها. ونصلي ونسلم ونبارك على محمد النبي الأمين، خاتم الرسل والأنبياء أجمعين، المرسل رحمة للعالمين، وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. I'd like to return to a basic and in many ways simple paradigm, and a rather simple idea. And that's the idea of the Quranic impulse. The Quranic impulse in human life. And the Quranic impulse in Muslim life. I will borrow from the philosophy of the Islamic thinker Malik bin Nabi the way that he would summarize the basic components of human social interaction and social existence. Malik bin Nabi would typically speak about that there are three basic things in human existence. There is the material that we deal with, the tools, the artifacts, elements of consumption, food, water, minerals, material. And material exists in human life, throughout human life, as an object desired by human beings and used by human beings to facilitate and help their life along. And the second element that Malik bin Nabi would typically talk about is the human factor. That there are human beings that have a complicated consciousness. But it is a consciousness that nevertheless has a consistent psychological core. The human brain and the human nervous system and indeed the way that a human being receives life, desires to continue existing, to continue living, and fears death, and deals with the inevitability of death as the second constant component core. But the third element, according to Malik bin Nabi, is the world of ideas, thought, ideas. Human beings are thinking animals. They are like every living creature that Allah has created. They are driven by a certain instinct. The instinct calls upon them to survive. When that instinct is present, and it is present for the vast majority of human beings, the vast majority of time, the instinct is one of survival, and the instinct is one of overcoming hardship and pain and overcoming loneliness and isolation. The instinct is one that drives human beings to always think of ways to exist, but also of ways to use the material before them. So between human beings and the material that they deal with is the third element that Malik bin Nabi would normally talk about. And the third element is the world of ideas and thought. Whatever the source, whatever the reason, human beings are thinking animals. Yes, they have a basic instinct coded in them by their maker. But beyond that instinct, human beings always think. They think about their existence. They think about the existence of people they like or they don't like, people they feel comfortable with, people they are threatened by, people that alienate them, people that embrace them and welcome them. They think about the material that exists all around them and how to deal with this material. And most critically, they think about how to come together and under what terms and what to do when they come together and how to negotiate between their existence and the existence of others and the existence of other things. Remarkably, what we normally refer to as civilization is nothing more than the sum total of ideas that guide human interaction towards each other, towards other human beings, and towards material things. From the moment of birth begins the process of socialization of a human being within the universe of ideas. And as I said, ideas about the self, ideas about the others, ideas about things, but there is a constant wave upon wave of ideas that visit the human consciousness until that human being perishes and leaves Earth. The realm of ideas is more critical than anything, because every human being, as they approach these three elements, becomes immersed in a world of ideas. So whether a human being does it consciously or not, whether they realize it or not, when they deal with other human beings and when they deal with material things, they are constantly generating ideas. They are constantly being led by ideas. And they are constantly dwelling in the world of ideas. If they consume selfishly, that is an idea. If they consume egocentrically, that is an idea. If they are self-referential, where they care about themselves and themselves alone, that is an idea. You cannot avoid the world of ideas. And as long as you cannot avoid the world of ideas, and you cannot avoid being led by ideas, and you cannot avoid creating meaning, i.e. creating ideas, and being guided by meaning, being guided by ideas, as long as you cannot avoid doing so, and you cannot, human beings are not just thinking animals, but they are political animals. They are political because their very existence has a direct impact on the world of material things and on the world of human things, the world of others. And because they are constantly negotiating their existence in reference to things and people, they are constantly engaged in a political negotiation. The very inherent nature of things is that you cannot avoid the dynamics of power. Whenever you act, you affect others. Whenever you speak, you affect others. And in doing so, you are engaged in a political dynamic, whether you recognize it or not. Now, we know that the world of ideas that guided human interaction to material things when Islam appeared on the scene, was a world which had become settled in modes of practice and existence. Feudalism was an established way of life. A mixture between mythology and power was an established way of life. The deification of human beings, the endowing of sacredness upon human beings and their position of power was an established way of life. Wherever you turned, the sacred mixed with the profane to reaffirm and to confirm privilege and power. To put it simply to you, whether you looked at the Persian Empire or you looked at the Abyssinian Empire, or you looked at the far-away civilizations that existed in what is now China, or you looked to the Aztec civilization in the Americas, or you looked to the Byzantine civilization, privilege and power claimed and assumed the sacred. Those in power claimed the podium of sacredness, and privilege was sacralized and holified, made holy. So that power dynamics became ideologically vested and settled to maintain privilege and power as they existed. Those who enjoyed sacred privilege and power in Byzantia enjoyed it decade after decade after decade after decade. And those who were disempowered were disempowered decade after decade after decade. The same was in Persia. The same was in Abyssinia. The same was in the Aztec civilizations. The same was in the far reaches of India and the far reaches of China. It was the same. In that world came the Quranic impulse. In that world came the Quranic impulse. The Quranic impulse was a radical, revolutionary idea. No, it was not about the optics of prayer. It was not about the optics of turbans. It was not about the optics of hijab. It was not about the optics of piety. It was not about the optics of anything. The Quranic impulse was a revolutionary idea. What was that revolutionary idea? Sacredness belongs to God and God alone. No power or privilege is sacred. Because no human being is sacred vis-a-vis other human beings. No entitlement to material things is sacred. Material things exist to benefit all of humanity. And the merits of a human being is according to their values and akhlaq, their ethics. Not according to their caste, class, privilege, lineage. It was a revolutionary idea that shook the world. It took the mythology-filled, illiterate, ignorant, backwards barbarians of the desert to break unto the world. It eventually sparked the European Enlightenment. And without the Islamic Quranic impulse, the European Enlightenment would have never happened. It challenged privilege and the idea of the sacred or the sacralized power and privilege. It challenged privilege and power that claimed sacredness and holiness. In everywhere that Islam went, Islam spread in Africa, spread in Indonesia, spread in Malaysia, spread in the Philippines, spread in India, to the far reaches of the world. And Muslims were animated by this Quranic impulse. It freed them. It excited their imagination. So the world of ideas that negotiated between human beings and material things in the Muslim consciousness centered around the Quranic impulse. We submit to Allah alone, but to no other. Submission, ubudiyya, is to Allah alone and to no other. Civilizations rise and fall. And that when the Islamic civilization fell, it was painful. Before World War I, there were at least centers of Islamic illumination in Cairo, in India, and in Istanbul. Leave alone Timbuktu and sub-Saharan Africa. After World War I, Istanbul fell and Timbuktu fell. And most of the sub-Saharan African illumination fell. After World War II, after World War I, Istanbul fell, and the others. After World War II, India fell, and the only remaining Islamic center of illumination became Cairo. But the truth is, whether those who were part of the project realized it or not, after 1948 and the creation of Israel and the defeat in 1956 and 1967 and the Camp David Accords, Cairo fell. There are no centers of Islamic illumination and enlightenment in the world anymore. All the centers have been defeated and crushed. And the Quranic impulse has faded into pietistic affectations. What are pietistic affectations? Pietistic affectations is when your heart wants to practice and display Islam. As a human being, you want to demonstrate Islamicity towards and vis-a-vis material things. But you're not sure what the Islamic idea is. And you're no longer clear-headed about the Quranic impulse. So what you do instead is you engage in the optics of the thing. You summarize Islamicity into a set of symbols and signals, like a certain pietistic language, or in an exaggerated display of tasbihat and tahmidat and takbirat and salawat. And you practice the optics because you're no longer sure about the world of ideas. It is not that you are rejecting the Quranic impulse. You're just confused about it. And because you're confused, you have time, you invest your time and energy in the optics of Islamicity rather than the values of Islamicity. When our former colonizers convinced us that somehow you can have the values of Islamicity negotiating between the human element and the material element through the excluding politics, when our former colonizers, when those who colonized Muslims, convinced Muslims that yes, go ahead, be a Muslim, deal with material things as human beings, as Muslims, but don't be political. You were convinced of an impossibility, a fallacy. Effectively, it means be thoroughly confused about what Muslim is. Go ahead, believe in things, but don't make a difference. Go ahead, believe in things, but don't challenge anyone. Go ahead, believe in things, but don't you dare say this is fair or unfair, this is just or unjust, this is equitable or not equitable. Embrace an apolitical Islam, which means embrace empty air. Embrace the optics of Islamicity. But forget the Quranic impulse that changed the world. Human beings are always guided by ideas. We are always, the space between us and material things is always filled with ideas. The question is, where do your ideas come from, and what is the substance of those ideas? Do you think of the sacred as existing to empower and facilitate your consumption of material? In other words, to bless the way you consume? Or do you think of the sacred as existing to challenge your consumption of material? Huge difference. Is the sacred, is the divine there to say, whatever your impulse towards property is, and not just property, but whatever you covet to consume, whether you are coveting material that was made by human beings like cars and planes and furniture, or you covet to consume other human beings, as in sexual desire. Is the sacred there to say, I am there to bless what you desire, and go ahead, because what you desire and what you choose and what you want is blessed and untouchable? Go ahead, indulge your sexual urges. Go ahead, indulge your consumption urges. Go ahead, consume the way you want to consume and the way you desire to consume. Or is the sacred there to say, hold on? Is your relationship to material things, to the act of consumption, whether it is sex or other material, is the sacred there to say, hold on, is it fair? Is it equitable? Is it just? Is it right? But the minute you do that, you've engaged in the political. You restrain and constrain and object and oppose. You've engaged in the political. The Quranic impulse. This is what it's all about. The revolution that the Quran introduced to humanity. This is precisely why, in the age of civilizational decline, when the centers of learning in Istanbul and in India and in Egypt have all crumbled and no longer exist, what exists there is a mirage, are optics, is falsehood, it's despotism, it's tyranny, it's injustice, it's corruption. In this age, we have no other choice but to return to the Quran and to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to say, Allah, inni maghlubun fantasir. We are defeated. Help us. Help us reinstill the Quranic impulse in our hearts. help us. Help us reinstill the Quranic impulse in our hearts. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. صلى الله عليه وسلم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين. وسبحان الله العلي العظيم. والله أكبر. والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه والتابعين بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. You want to know what happens when the Quranic impulse is erased from the heart of people. You want to know what happens when a Muslim is guided by nothing but the values of consumption for the sake of consumption. A recent incident speaks volumes to no end. This incident involved Muhammad Khaja, the ambassador of the UAE, the Emirates, the Emirati ambassador to Israel. Muhammad Khaja goes to Shalom Cohen. Shalom Cohen is the current spiritual leader of the Shas political party. Shalom Cohen heads the Sephardic political party in Israel called Shas. That party was initially established as the party of the guardians of the Torah. And Shalom Cohen himself, his whole spiritual and political leadership is anchored around the principle that they are there to act as the guardians of the Torah in Israel. Shalom Cohen and his party want an Israel that follows the laws of the Torah. They oppose secularism in Israel. They think Israel angers God by being too secularized. They want the law of the Torah in the land of the Torah. The Shas party supports the expulsion of Palestinians and supports the expansion of Israeli settlements to include all of Palestinian land, to include Eretz Israel, Greater Israel. The Shas party and Shalom Cohen in the past have referred to Arabs as animals and insects and vipers. And in the past have even said that the only answer to Arabs is extermination and violence. The followers of the Shas party are infamous for their chants, death to Arabs, death to Muhammad. This is no peace-loving people. This is no cute little nice people. They are people who are anchored in what, if they were Muslim, would have been called extremism, Islamic fanaticism, jihadi ideology, militancy. But the ambassador of the Emirat, Muhammad Khaja, goes to visit Shalom Cohen What does he tell him? He tells them, I'm here to get your blessings and guidance. Shalom Cohen puts his hands on Muhammad Khaja's head and blesses him. Muhammad Khaja tells Shalom Cohen, Jazeera is evil because they demonize Israel. And the Muslim Brotherhood is evil because they oppose Israel. Israel has killed 67 Palestinian children. The pictures of those 67 children have been printed in Israeli media. But Muhammad Khaja is not there to talk to Shalom Cohen about the murder of the Palestinian children, or about the expansion of Israeli settlements, or about anything. He is there to condemn the Palestinian resistance, to condemn the Ikhwan, to condemn political Islam, and to assure Shalom Cohen that the Emirat supports the Shas party, which is a racist party. Shalom Cohen is the head of the Rabbinic Council for guarding and protecting the Torah. Now look at the irony of this. The Emirat, which has dedicated itself to fighting political Islam, because according to the Emirat, there is no role for Islam in politics, goes to the spiritual head of a religious Jewish party. Political Judaism is okay. And in fact, he's there. He tells him, I'm here to get your blessings and guidance. The Emirati ambassador is there to validate and authenticate a party that claims to refer to Jewish values in negotiating the relationship between human beings and material things, while condemning any Islamic movement that tries to do the same. Political Islam is evil. Political Judaism, we need your guidance and blessings. Racists in Israel, we need your guidance and blessings. Those who want to exterminate Palestinians, we need your guidance and blessings. No honor, no dignity, and in fact, no values whatsoever. This is on video. The nice things about Israelis is that, unlike their Arab counterparts who live in despotism and hide their treachery and their treason, Israelis share everything. So the video was leaked by Shalom Cohen himself. No dignity. Criminal. Doesn't care about the 67 Palestinians killed. 67 children. Doesn't care about Jerusalem, doesn't care about the settlements, doesn't care about Israeli racism, doesn't care about any of it. And yet, again and again and again, I will never tire of it. There are American Muslim leaders who support this criminal government, the Emirat, who serve under council of tolerance and council of fiqh and all that nonsense. And American Muslims continue donating money, continue attending their lectures, continue treating people like Hamza Yusuf and his Zaytuna Institute and all those who are part of the Emirati enterprise as honored dignitaries. What do you need? What do you need to see treason and treachery and immorality for what it is? At what point do you say enough is enough? I'd rather exist in poverty because there is a hereafter, and because the fate of Islam is involved, the entire fate of Islam is involved, then take money from people like that. But even if their conscience doesn't wake up, where is your conscience? Why do you continue supporting people like that? Why do you continue forgiving them? Why do you continue validating them? Why do you continue referring to them as shuyukh? They're no shuyukh. Unless sheikh stands for a human being without dignity, without honor, without morality. At what point do you say this is too ugly? The blood of 67 children screams at me, haunts my nightmares. This cannot stand. Why are they allowed to be the guardians of the Torah and we are not allowed to be the guardians of the Quran? Why? Why? أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي الله ولي ولكم إني داع فآمنوا. اللهم اعف عنا، اللهم ارحمنا، اللهم اغفر لنا، اللهم اهدنا لأفضل من هذا سبلا يا رب العالمين يا علي عظيم. Allah forgive our sins. Allah guide us to the straight path. Allah give us a better course and guide us to a better course, the course of enlightenment, the course of morality and ethics, the course of the Quran. Ya Ali Azim. وصلي وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه التواب بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. آمين آمين وأقم الصلاة.